The universe knows I'm looking for this. Now, Tony, you've dug into some of these things before. We're going to look at the Cecil Rhodes letters with Theodor Herzl. We're going to look at some Cecil Rhodes letters in Zionism. We can look at the letters between Cecil Rhodes and Chaim Weizmann. And then we can check into like the historicity, right? Is it true that Herzl called Zionism a colonization adventure? Not really, because he said venture, not adventure. But yes, he did see it as a colonial project, right? So if the founders of Zionism that brought about the state of Israel and that adopted the flag of the Zionist Congress, right? So there's a continuity between the Zionist founders and the Zionist Congress where they plan to take Palestine and make it theirs, and that actual colonization that percolates up to today that might also have an apartheid element to it. So these are elements of a narrative that exist that are very inconvenient to the people who are out there doing the genocide.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought like
Let's
things
not
like
forget
this.
here, like this is from the Cairo Review. This is just a summation.
What do
I
you
was going
got?
over Resolution 181, and I was going over a couple of different resources about it. And this is an interesting summation from the Cairo Review, essays framing the partition plan for Palestine. It says here from the perspective, and this is actually a brilliant article. And if I were to, I actually suggest people check this out. Maybe I'll make it available on the forum. In fact, I will. But it says from the perspective of the Arab Palestinians, and I'll show who wrote this later, who at the turn of the century constitute about 90% of the population. 1947-48 did not mark the beginning of the struggle, but coincided instead with the final chapter of a war that started the implementation of a number of rejectionist policies and strategies against Palestinians. Periodization is, of course, always arbitrary. However, it is historically accurate to claim that the year that more than any other ignited the basic components of the conflict is 1907. That year, the Eighth Zionist Conference created and Rich, you've talked about this many times, quote unquote, Palestine Office, the Agricultural Colonization Department in Jaffa, under the direction of Arthur Rupin, whose main objective, in Rupin's words, was, quote, the creation of a Jewish milieu and of a closed Jewish economy in which
Circular
producers,
economies.
exactly, consumers and middlemen shall all be Jewish, end quote. Indeed, quote unquote, rejectionism featured very prominently in Rupin's mindset. And this is just one of many anecdotes highlighting the way in which the mandate for Palestine, 1922, by the League of Nations for Britain to have control of that area, as well as then what was then after World War II in November of 1947. Voted on by the General Assembly, of which 13 abstained. Only 56 countries, of which represents like 1/3 of the world, actually participated in. And we all know about the blackmail that took place with the Central and South American, actually mentioned in this article, interestingly enough. So the point is, they're going back. The Arabs had a good reason to reject it. They made up 90%. There's hundreds of thousands of Arabs versus, you know, uh, tens of thousands, or
But that
just,
was before the Hezbollah, like this 10 hours ago. Fascinating hypothesis of a circular economy of war crimes. Israel commits war crime, then they say it never happened. Then they say it happened, but it
right.
wasn't us. Then
And
they
this is
say it was us, but we didn't mean
okay,
to.
okay,
We didn't mean
right.
to, but it was justified. And then they bombard Twitter with memes, call everyone anti-Semites until they forget, and then they do the next one. That's a pattern. That's a legit pattern that's
Yeah,
being
this
observed
is this
in
is
the
what's
Twitter sphere.
stated by sort of the Israeli side of Resolution 181 from various lawyers that oversaw this. It says here, aware of Arab past aggression, Resolution 181 in paragraph C calls on the Security Council to, quote, determine as a threat to the peace, breach of the peace, or act of aggression in accordance with Article 39 of the Charter, any attempt to alter by force the settlement envisaged by this resolution. And the ones who sought to alter by force the settlement envisioned Resolution 181, according to this, were the Arabs who threatened bloodshed if the UN were to adopt the resolution. So you can see in how they build the straw man in regards to, and this is actually really interesting, mythsandfacts.org. It's an online book in regards to what took place during and from the Israeli perspective during the resolution in November of 1947 in the partition plan, Resolution 181.
That's like 50 years after Cecil Rhodes died. So I'm sure there's no reflection between the gentlemen who were the founding fathers of Zionism and the colonizer. You know what? There is a connection, Tony, because if you think back, who funded Cecil Rhodes? It was the English Rothschilds.
Yep.
And who did they address the Balfour Declaration to? They addressed it to the English Lord Rothschild.
Yeah, and it was also
So those two
Um,
apartheid states kind of do
the
have a
British,
connection that you're not allowed to talk about because it might lead you to
yeah, the
figure
British
out what's
Prime
going
Minister
on.
is giving it to the British Rothschild, yeah, in a sense, or the one stationed in Britain, right? Right.
Well, let's just read this little excerpt from what is this book called? The Letters and Papers of Chaim Weizmann, Series B. This is from page 20. Here is Rhodesia, a land of 440,000 square miles. Now, that's a land named after Cecil Rhodes. It has copper, water, gold, and land as much as one likes. It was first opened 50 years ago by Cecil Rhodes, a great imperialist and a British hero who was praised for having won this outpost of British imperialism. So, Weizmann, referring to Rhodes as a great man, might have more to it. You'd have to look into. I don't know too much about Weizmann's proclivities and who he hangs out with. And Herzl also likewise talked about colonization in the Zionist metaphor in this situation. So now you got two founding fathers talking about colonization, talking about how Rhodes is a great guy, and there's more resources to be had on such things. We can get past Van Hollen here, and we can also look at there's this is what we just looked at, letters and papers of Chaim Weizmann. But there's also letters between Weizmann and Rhodes. Israel's settlements have no legal validity, United Nations. So you've got decisions that came out of this and the preceding organizations like the Palestine Restoration Fund and also the Palestine Exploration Fund. And then they tie back to the founder of Israel, according to Balfour100.com, the official website of the people who created the state that so much drama has gone on over the past 100 years. And there was one more meme worth showing you, but I have to figure out how to search for it. Cover me, Tony. I'm going in.
Yeah, sure. And also, one of the things I really liked about, let me see which video it was. It was the one defining apartheid. And this is fantastic, actually. Apartheid has three properties to the essential definition of what makes it up: an intent by one group to dominate the other, systematic oppression by one racial group over another, and one or more inhumane acts. Like, and it goes into examples that they showed in the video. Um, what's powerful about this is they defined it. So now, once it's defined, you can actually go out and understand what you're looking for. I'm not sure that Michael Rappaport ever defined apartheid. Probably doesn't have a really good working understanding of what that looks like. So he doesn't actually know what to look for, which only helps to embellish his whole interest in creating circular reasoning.
Here's where people don't know what to look for. Here's a meme. America 100 years ago, China 100 years ago, Germany 100 years ago, Russia 100 years ago, Palestine 100 years ago, Israel 100 years ago. Now that's a meme. Okay. I fixed it. Now it reads properly. Put the Balfour Declaration right there. Boom. And you know enough to understand that that does. It looks more balanced and fixed now. It was on paper. They created it on paper. Here's the 67 words by Lord Balfour. And history just keeps rolling from those 67 words. I mean, it's kind of a big deal. Much ado about something here, right? 67 words still going on, disrupting the people's lives of the people who live there. And oh, by the way, the indigenous population included Christians, Muslims, Jews. And you know what? The Zionists didn't like the Jews that already lived there. They're not on the program, as it were. They wanted the strong Jews who were going to till the fields and all that stuff that Weizmann and all these guys talk about, Ben Gurion especially.
They wanted a nation state. So they envisioned sort of the ideas, the institutions that create a nation state, just with the Jewish sort of historicity involved to give it a pseudo identity.
And when Ben Gurion has quotes like, if I could save half the Jewish children by sending them to England, instead of getting them all to go to Palestine, then he'd do that. Like he would sacrifice half his population in order to get that goal achieved. What do you think they did with the people that didn't want to move and weren't down with the Zionist plan to go to Palestine under the transfer agreement, which they were working with? They were working with the tiny mustache guy. I mean, You got the transfer agreement. You
We have
got
transfer
Zionism
agreements, a
during the
big one,
Holocaust.
because that's also mentioned in that Cairo review about like they go in, it's like there wasn't a major until 1930s, and that's when the indigenous population started getting very concerned because they started seeing more and more Jew European Ashkenazi, essentially Jewish
People
Eastern
on the
European.
Herzl and Weizmann train
Yes, you got it. You
of
got it.
thought about getting up and moving to a place that people might welcome you if you come there nice, but if you go there expecting them to just give up everything without a fight, obviously 100 years later you got something else that you should consider in that situation, because it's not going to work out like that. And you should have known that from like 1929, the Hebron massacre, when that started popping off. That's 10 years after the colonization, 10 plus years after the Balfour Declaration.
Correct.
So when these things are still going on and people won't let you add the evidence of how it is started on a table, it's like them not letting you define the terms, which means they're going to reserve the right to change and move the goalpost anywhere they want in that
Yeah, fallacy of
conversation.
the mean.
And
Yeah,
that's
right.
dishonest dialogue. That
That's
shouldn't be
purposeful.
tolerated. People should know how to push back with intellectual self-defense and take ideas that are intellectually bankrupt and learn how to dismiss them as arbitrary and get everyone else to understand that as well, so they can do likewise and get more signal and less noise. The noise is
Exactly.
not nice. It's getting loud for people, especially in the Gaza Strip. It has not been quiet there for probably 4 months. So
And long before then, even.
we have some new evidence from the IDF. They got it all, Tony. It's like it's called Hamas in hospitals. Here's your evidence. So I clicked it because I'm
It's always
incredulous.
post
I'm
hoc,
like,
though.
okay,
It's always post hoc.
wait till
Post
they
hoc,
get
ergo propter hoc. It happened, therefore this was the cause, sort of
Tony.
thing.
They found military weaponry made of metal in the MRI room. It has to be real. And that's their best evidence in this video. Spoiler alert. But I gave them the benefit of the doubt. I'm like, oh, I'm going to learn something here. Maybe I was wrong. I'm going to have to do a retraction finally on the show. But nope,
Oh,
not
mate, that might be a
now. Not
fallacy
from
of
this video.
ignorantio elenchi. That's like a type of non sequitur. That's like a really nuanced fallacy. Wow. Good job on you,
Then
idea forces, to give me a really nuanced fallacy I don't get to use too often.
then as they try to drag UNRWA through the mud, they want to replace it with the CIA's USAID, which would be real cushy for the people. Like they all got the same genocide, ethnic cleansing agenda over there. It's no difference between the Mossad and CIA.
It's all part
And
of the same
then
death cult at that point.
we got Israel parading new prisoners that we haven't shown. And then you got the ICJ reviewing the occupation, settlement, and annexation. So there's like a whole bunch of different things being investigated. So we need a little summary on that. And then Israel threatens to finish the job by Ramadan, which is going to lead into our next set of clips that then finally lead into like the whole where everything in this episode comes together. So I hope you've been paying attention for the past couple hours. And that will get us all the points on the record in a way that you can understand, but also see how they interconnect. But it does. It takes 6 or 7 hours to get all these things into the time capsule that is the thing that you see in the future as this show. All right, so let's go to this next clip. And yeah, I think that about covers it for Founding Fathers, Rhodes, colonization, and the endeavors going on today. I mean, this is colonization when they just say America's like, don't do it. And they're like, we got 3,000 new ones coming. Ha.
And
It's
think about
called,
it. Think,
yeah.
hold on. And Chuck's, that's a good point. And like, let's draw sort of these sort of recursive events in history. So you have the bombing of King David Hotel by members, what, of the Irgun. That was back. What year was that? What decade?
1947. I got a
1940.
book here.
Yeah. So
Blood by
you,
Fire. I got the Ear Gun. Yeah, a whole bunch.
yeah. So
1948 by Benny Morris.
and let's not forget about the West Bank settlements, 60s and 70s, and some of the more radical groups that are settling in the West Bank, doing some pretty dubious and
But to be fair, I'm also going to put on PLO did a whole bunch of terrorism that,
they did.
it's not
They
out of
did.
context, but they blew up cars and they blew up
Oh
people and they
yeah.
blew up women and children and they bombed
It
buses
seems
and
like there are
all that
two
other stuff. I
terrorist
accept
type
that
of
all on the
organizations.
record.
Yeah,
I
me
just
too.
want it to be
100%.
weighed fairly on the scales when people are trying to present these things in a public place. Okay.
And the PLO
So
came from the same sort of more hyper militaristic or terroristic styles Arab cell, arguably. I'm trying to find. I remember going over this very early on, the history of like what the PLO and many of the other Arab sort of parties came out of, or the Palestinian. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I'll try
yeah,
to
yeah.
find that because that's a
All
good
right,
point
because
because
we are
they are
continuing
not
to
innocent.
learn. We don't think
They're
we know everything, and we look stuff up, beyond reasonable doubt, so that we can move forward. That's how you have to learn. So let's go to this block and let's learn some more because it's still going on.
They hide in hospitals because for them, a hospital is a safe place. They won't be targeted when they're inside a hospital. Indonesian Hospital, Kamal Adwan Hospital, Sheikh Hamad Hospital, Rantisi Hospital, Al Shifa Hospital, and Al Quds Hospital. What do all these hospitals have in common? Well, let's break it down. I know 16 employees in the hospital, a doctor, a nurse, a paramedic, or clerks, who also have different positions in Al-Qassam. For decades, Hamas has strategically placed terrorist infrastructure around sensitive civilian areas, such as schools, kindergartens, and mosques. The terrorist infrastructure is placed in these areas in order to exploit the civilians of Gaza as human shields and protective vests for Hamas terrorists.